Hollywood knew Walter Pidgeon as the epitome of dignity and class. With his deep voice and distinguished bearing, he was the perfect gentleman in classics like Mrs. Miniver and Forbidden Planet. But behind that polished exterior lay a man forged by unimaginable tragedy, devastating loss, and a strength that turned personal catastrophe into one of Hollywood's most enduring careers. Most people think Pidgeon was just another handsome leading man, but his story begins in the muddy trenches of World War I, where a horrific accident nearly ended his life before it truly began. Born in Canada in 1917, young Walter was studying law when the war broke out. Like thousands of young men, he enlisted immediately, joining the Royal Regiment of Canadian Artillery with dreams of serving his country. The accident that changed everything happened during what should have been routine training. Pidgeon was working with heavy artillery when something went catastrophically wrong. Two massive gun carriages, each weighing several tons, somehow shifted and caught him between them. The crushing force shattered bones throughout his body and left him fighting for his life in a military hospital for 17 agonizing months. Doctors weren't sure he'd ever walk properly again, let alone pursue any kind of physical career. But this near-death experience gave Pidgeon something invaluable, an unshakable inner strength and a profound appreciation for life itself. When he finally recovered, he made a decision that shocked his conservative Canadian family. Instead of returning to his safe law studies, he decided to pursue his secret passion for performing. He moved to Boston, where he studied voice at the Boston Conservatory while working as a bank runner to pay the bills. In 1919, still recovering from his war injuries, Pidgeon married Edna Pickles, a young woman who saw past his physical limitations to the determined man beneath. They were deeply in love, and when Edna became pregnant in 1921, Walter was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a father. He'd survived a war, overcome disability, and now he was building the family he'd always dreamed of. But fate had other plans. The birth went horribly wrong, and in an era before modern medical intervention, there was nothing doctors could do. Edna died during childbirth, leaving Walter alone with a newborn daughter he'd also named Edna. At just 24 years old, he was a widowed single father in an age when men rarely raised children alone. The grief was overwhelming, but Pidgeon made another shocking decision. He sent his infant daughter to live with his mother in Canada while he pursued his career, believing he couldn't provide the stability she needed. This devastating loss shaped everything about Walter Pidgeon's screen persona. The reserved dignity, the emotional distance, the way he seemed to hold something back in every performance, it all came from a man who'd learned that happiness could be snatched away in an instant. He threw himself into work as a way to cope with grief that never fully healed. Moving to New York in the early 1920s, Pidgeon began his slow climb through vaudeville and Broadway. He was talented, but not spectacular, dignified, but not dazzling. When Hollywood called in 1926, he thought his luck was finally changing. But his early film career was a series of disappointments, small roles, forgettable pictures, and constant rejection. By 1928, discouraged and nearly broke, he actually gave up on Hollywood and returned to Broadway. The advent of sound films in the early 1930s gave Pidgeon a second chance. His rich, trained voice was perfect for the new medium, and slowly, steadily, he began landing better roles. But it wasn't until 1941, when he was cast opposite Greer Garson in Blossoms in the Dust, that everything changed. The chemistry between them was instant and electric. Not romantic passion, but something deeper and more mature. Their partnership became legendary when they starred together in Mrs. Miniver in 1942. The film won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and both Pidgeon and Garson received Oscar nominations. Suddenly, at age 42, Walter Pidgeon was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. But unlike other leading men, he'd gotten there through perseverance rather than overnight success, and his mature approach to stardom reflected the hard-won wisdom of a man who'd survived genuine tragedy. What audiences didn't know was that Pidgeon had found love again. In 1931, he'd quietly married Ruth Walker, a secretary who understood his reserved nature and didn't try to change him. Their marriage would last 53 years until his death, almost unheard of in Hollywood. Ruth never sought the spotlight and rarely gave interviews, but she provided the stability that had been missing from Pidgeon's life since his war injury. During the height of his fame in the 1940s, Pidgeon made another surprising choice. While other stars focused solely on their careers, he became deeply involved in industry politics. In 1952, he was elected president of the Screen Actors Guild, taking over during one of the most turbulent periods in Hollywood history. The blacklist was in full swing, with actors, writers, and directors being destroyed by accusations of communist sympathies. As SAG president, Pidgeon walked a careful line between protecting his members and avoiding the political minefields that could destroy careers. He privately helped actors facing blacklisting, while publicly maintaining the dignified neutrality that had become his trademark. His leadership during this dark period earned him respect from both sides of the political divide, but it also showed a moral courage that few suspected from the seemingly reserved actor. The 1950s brought new challenges as Pidgeon aged out of leading man roles, but instead of desperately clinging to youth like many aging stars, he gracefully transitioned to character parts. His role as Dr. Morbius in Forbidden Planet in 1956 introduced him to an entirely new generation of fans and proved his versatility as an actor. He continued working steadily through the 1960s and 1970s, always professional, always prepared, always dignified. Behind the scenes, Pidgeon remained devoted to the daughter he had to give up in 1921. As an adult, Edna Pidgeon maintained a relationship with her father, though the early separation had created a distance that never fully healed. She died in 1978, just 6 years before her father, and those who knew Pidgeon said her death hit him harder than any professional setback ever could. Walter Pidgeon died in 1984 at age 87, having donated his body to medical science, a final act of service that reflected the same selflessness he'd shown throughout his life. His career had spanned nearly 60 years, from silent films to science fiction, but more importantly, it demonstrated how personal tragedy could be transformed into professional strength. The man who had been crushed between artillery pieces in World War I had become one of Hollywood's most enduring stars. The young father who had lost his wife and had to give up his child had found the emotional depth to portray complex, mature men on screen. The struggling actor who had been rejected countless times had developed the patience and persistence that carried him through a 6-decade career. Walter Pidgeon's story proves that sometimes the most compelling Hollywood tales aren't about scandal or excess, but about quiet courage and the way ordinary people can overcome extraordinary circumstances. He never courted controversy or sought headlines, but his life was filled with drama that would make any scriptwriter jealous. The difference was that his drama was real, his courage was genuine, and his dignity was earned through decades of turning tragedy into triumph.